Some video game franchises notice the success of their villains and decide to give them a chance of being protagonists. Although in their debut appearance they were out to ruin the world, a quick change of heart or a shift in the story allows them to take on the mantle of the main character. So put on your deviously dapper monocle and twirl your dastardly moustache, because the following villains managed to get their own bit of spotlight. I'm Sai for WhatCulture.com, and here are 10 video game villains that became heroes in the sequel. Number 10, Panda King, Sly Cooper Thieves in Time. Every character in the Sly Cooper series of 3D platformers is full of charm and personality. However, if there's one anthropomorphic person among them whose charm and personality could make for 2 characters, it's probably the fiery villain of the original game, the Panda King. After all, the guy is so unhinged that he actually treats his reflection as if it were another person. In the original THIEVES Raccoonus release, Panda King was a member of the Fiendish Five, acting as the gang's pyrotechnics expert. Both quick to anger and irrational, the Panda King was as volatile as his fireworks, making him a rather dangerous adversary. However, in the third installment of the series, Sly Cooper Thieves in Time, the King undergoes a drastic change. After Sly defeats him, he comes back to his home village and turns to the tranquil life of a monk. Eventually, his daughter is kidnapped and he teams up with Sly's gang to rescue her, becoming an unexpected hero. The best part about this alliance is that you actually get to play as the Panda King and experience what it's like to shoot heat-seeking fireworks out of a panda's back. You know, as they're known to do in nature. Number 9, SHINOBU Jacobs, No More Heroes 2. SHINOBU Jacobs is an 18-year-old assassin and one of the early bosses of the original No More Heroes. As the title of the game suggests, she's by no means a selfless or kind person, as evidenced by the fact that her first on-screen appearance was quickly followed by her murdering a class full of high school students. The girl is a born killer, and when Travis meets her, her desire to get revenge on the person who killed her father takes her natural talents into a pretty disturbing direction, even by the standards of a game about assassins killing each other for money and glory. However, after Travis defeats her and spares her life to let her find her father's killer, SHINOBU's attitude changes completely. She goes from a ruthless, impatient and angry murderer to Travis's apprentice and starts to kill in order to improve her skill and impress her new master. The sequel to No More Heroes even allows you to play as this new rendition of SHINOBU, taking out assassins for Travis and helping him on his journey of revenge. Obviously, both of them are still terrible killers, but at least they're murdering people with the power of friendship. Number 8, Donkey Kong, Donkey Kong Country. There's no video game villain more classic than Donkey Kong. His feud with Mario in the original arcade release is the gaming world's equivalent of a fight between an old western hero and that dastardly charlatan twirling his moustache I mentioned in the opening. This said, over the years Donkey Kong has undergone plenty of transformations, and these days most people would actually associate him with his Donkey Kong Country series. This franchise completely transformed Donkey Kong into a fully fledged hero with his own team of friends and allies and a selection of villains. Instead of spitefully chucking barrels at plumbers, these days the big ape is more likely to be seen adventuring with his pals, hoarding piles of bananas and defeating hordes of Kremlings. It seems all he needed to enjoy life was to settle his differences with Mario and stop kidnapping his girlfriend. Who knew? Number 7, Shadow the Hedgehog. Shadow the Hedgehog. It's safe to say that Shadow the Hedgehog is synonymous with the concept of the edgelord. From the moment of his debut in Sonic Adventure 2, the Sega team did everything they could to prove that their new cool and dark version of their iconic mascot Sonic is a really bad but awesome kind of guy. From his fights with the Lord to defeating Sonic's opponent and laughing about their lack of power, Shadow is all about being the villain in Sonic's story. However, late into the story of Sonic Adventure 2, he realizes his purpose is a force for good, and so when a game focusing solely on his character finally came out, Sega decided to do things a little bit differently. Actually, they pumped up the levels of campy edge even higher with guns, motorcycles and some good old-fashioned butt rock. However, while Shadow's own game, simply named Shadow the Hedgehog, lets you play as a villain, it also features a morality system with branching paths for those who would like to see how the ultimate lifeform would fare in the role of a hero. That is, if you can get past the terrible, terrible, terrible gameplay. Number 6, BILLIE, Death of the Outsider. The gritty and dark world of Dishonored is no place for a hero, especially when you consider how many times Corvo, or rather you, sliced some poor guard in half and then fed their corpse to hungry rats just because you could. However, if there's one act that even the citizens of Dunwall would consider truly villainous, it would probably be killing their beloved Empress Jessamine. And that's exactly the crime that Dowd and his protege BILLIE are guilty of. The duo of mysterious assassins known as the Whalers set the entire story of the first Dishonored in motion by killing the Empress and incriminating Corvo for their hit. However, the deed begins to weigh heavily on them, and eventually Dowd decides to quit his shifty assassin ways, while BILLIE seeks to rid the both of them of the supernatural influence of their godlike patron, the Outsider. This redemption story is what the spin-off sequel to Dishonored 2, The Death of the Outsider, is all about. In the game, you try to put an end to the evil caused by the Outsider's magic, logic, and while you're technically still assassinating people, you're at least doing it for a good cause. Or just to see how far that random guard will fly if you throw a grenade at him. Number 5, Vaas, Far Cry 6, Vaas, Insanity. Despite playing only a minor role in Far Cry 3, Vaas, the mad pirate of the Rook Islands, is easily the best part of the entire game. He's an equally charismatic and ruthless villain who not only manages to captivate the player with his harrowing antics, but also serves as a dark reflection of the main character Jason Brody. Vaas is such a complex and interesting character that it obviously rubbed some players the wrong way that he not only didn't get a bigger role in the game, but you also couldn't play as him. Thankfully, this issue was remedied with the release of Far Cry 6's DLC, Vaas Insanity. The game is a unique roguelike take on the usual Far Cry formula. The player is tasked with retrieving 3 pieces of the Silver Dragon Blade to appease Vaas's sister Cetra and flee the madness of his own mind. The highlight of the DLC is obviously Vaas, whose comments, jokes and insight into the unspoken parts of Far Cry 3's storyline make for a rather entertaining listen as you mow down rows of imaginary enemies. Remember, it's not insanity if you do the same thing over and over specifically to listen to Vaas's voice. Number 4, GORO MAJIMA, Yakuza 0. GORO MAJIMA, Yakuza fans' favourite one-eyed lunatic, is a menace that loves to stalk and fight the series' protagonist, Kiryu Kazuma. Although he mostly does this with a flair of hilarity that makes him seem more comical than threatening, he's relentless in his pursuit and his goal to kill Kazuma, at least in the beginning. The thing is, due to his maniacal and unpredictable nature, Goro eventually develops an odd kinship with the Dragon of Dojima, which is probably why Yakuza's creators decided to turn him into one of the protagonists of Yakuza 0 and give him his very own backstory that humanizes him and shows that inside this chaotic and violent mobster lies the heart of a sentimental and compassionate softie. The prequel dives into Goro's past before his transformation into the Mad Dog of Shimano. From helping a blind girl in need to fighting the injustice within the Tojo clan, the title gives Goro plenty of opportunity to prove he can be Tokyo's hero as much as its spontaneous and Kiryu-obsessed wrecking ball. Not to mention showcasing his ability to absolutely kill it on the mic during karaoke night, oh yes. Number 3, the Octolings, Splatoon 2 Octo Expansion. Despite its cute art style and colourfully messy gameplay, Splatoon is actually filled with a lot of dark undertones. For starters, the game takes place thousands of years after humans have gone extinct due to polluting their own planet, and its adorable squid protagonists are constantly at war with the villainous Octolings. The original Splatoon paints, no pun intended, the Octolings as a group of brainwashed and fiercely loyal soldiers that are indoctrinated by their evil octopus overlord to fight in his wars against the Inklings. Yes, we're still talking about a game where you splash people with paint. Through the entire single-player campaign, you fight the Octoling soldiers until you finally reach the finale where the Inkling idols, the Squid Sisters, perform a song so amazing that it creates a spark of revolution amongst the Octoling kind. This moment becomes the foundation for Splatoon 2's DLC, the Octo Expansion, which introduces new playable Octolings freed from their overlord's propaganda and ready to fight against his regime. Of course, it's all still done with buckets of paint and squirt guns, but considering all this convoluted lore, it's nice to know their splash-tastic fun isn't part of some bizarre dictatorship. Number 2, Miles Edgeworth, Ace Attorney Investigations, Miles Edgeworth. Edgeworth, the ruthless prosecutor and Phoenix Wright's arch-nemesis, is one of the most recognisable and popular antagonists in the Ace Attorney series. His sharp wit, underhanded tactics and theatrical reactions to your timely objections not only make him a thoroughly entertaining villain, but also a likeable one. The sentiment is only made stronger by the fact that even in the first game, Miles is written to be a sympathetic character. He goes from a well-intentioned but misguided rival to the victim of his own mistakes, and finally to Phoenix Wright's frenemy. This is why it was inevitable that eventually Miles Edgeworth would become the hero of his own game. Ace Attorney Investigations Miles Edgeworth is a spin-off sequel that takes place after the events of the original Ace Attorney trilogy, and follows Miles as he uses his prosecutor powers to uncover a conspiracy concerning a secret smuggling ring. It's a deeply satisfying change of pace for Miles, as for once he actually gets to prosecute someone genuinely worthy of prison instead of wrongly, and possibly illegally, accusing innocent people like he loves to do in the first game. Oh Edgeworth, what a lovable law-breaking goofball you are. And number 1, Handsome Jack, Borderlands the pre-sequel. Handsome Jack oozes personality, so much so that you're not even mad at him when he tries to kill you or gloats about how much better he is compared to a lowly worm such as yourself. With such a well-written and popular character, it was inevitable that Jack would play a bigger role in future games, even after his death in Borderlands 2. And indeed, the next game that came right out after Borderlands 2 was the pre-sequel, dedicated entirely to Jack's backstory and his surprisingly heroic origin. The prequel dives into Jack's past to show that before he was a ruthless and megalomaniacal CEO of an evil corporation, he was actually an idealistic visionary who wanted to use the secrets of the vault to turn Pandora into a more civilized place. In addition to learning more about Jack's past, the game game also allows you to play as him, or rather a very convincing doppelganger, serving as Jack's body double. All in all, it's the perfect game for those who couldn't get enough of hearing Jack's voice, just like handsome Jack himself. Let's keep talking about video game villains. Click on this video right here to watch 10 iconic video game villains that were ruined over time. Make sure you like this video and leave a comment down below about more villains that turned face in the sequel. Don't forget to head over to whatculture.com for more content every day. I've been Sai for What Culture, and have a good week.